Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Darylyn, and today I am kicking off a new series that I'm going to be running over here on the channel dedicated to the fanciest, schmanciest, bougiest, most expensive plants that I can find on the internet. And today we are kicking off the series with a bang, and we are discussing fancy monstera. Now, keep in mind that I've tried to keep this list in order of accessibility and covetedness, and also sometimes price as much as possible, but this video is going to be a product of the time that it was filmed, and while the information I would say is accurate as of right now in spring of 2022, keep in mind if you're watching this in the future, how things may have changed. Additionally, it's also important to note that in these categories, large form of any type of variegation is usually going to be more valuable than a small form variety, and also that a particularly spectacular specimen of any kind could potentially be fetching a much higher price than specimens of that type of monstera would normally go for. It's all just kind of up to the eye of the beholder, and at the end of the day, plants are pretty much worth what someone's willing to pay for them. All right, let's get into it. All right, to kick off our list, we of course have to start with some absolute classics. First and foremost, we are talking about the Monstera Deliciosa albo. Now, the small form Monstera Deliciosa albo is pretty much quintessentially the entry-level fancy monstera, and it's easy to see why. They're absolutely beautiful, and they come in a wide variety, a wide array of variegation patterns, and there's usually something for everyone's price point as well. These plants used to be much more expensive and hard to come by, but over the past couple of years, more and more people have been propagating their plants, selling them, and they've become a lot more accessible. They are still a little bit on the pricey end, and this is largely to do with the difficulty in propagating them. In fact, a lot of fancy variegated monstera are difficult to propagate. Variegation a lot of times makes plants more susceptible to rot, unfortunately, and that is one of the reasons why variegated monsteras are so expensive. At the height of the albo monstera mania, you would expect to pay anywhere from $500 to $700 for a small plant. Nowadays, price can vary quite widely depending on the quality and size of the plant, but you're probably looking at, $200 to $300 for an established small plant, which is a vast improvement over where the prices used to be. If you're looking for like an unrooted cutting, I mean, you could probably get something unrooted or a node for less than $100. So much more accessible than they ever used to be. Regardless of the decline in price, they're still an absolutely classic and quintessentially fancy plant that cannot be denied. My personal favorite albo monstera patterning are the super marbled ones, like this beautiful lady right here. Don't forget about her, because we're going to come back to her later in the video. Next on the list is, of course, the Monstera Thai constellation. This is an absolute classic, but the demand for this plant has kind of fluctuated and been all over the place over the last couple of years because a lot of folks were holding out hope that Costa Farms was eventually going to put these out from tissue culture and sell them for $99 in big box stores. If you have been paying attention to the plant community lately, you know that that is probably not going to ever happen. And so demand for the plant is probably going to start going up as people who are no longer going to be holding out look and finally find their plant. The Monstera Thai constellation used to kind of be considered a little bit less desirable than the Monstera albo, but that I think has certainly changed. A lot more people are more conscious of what they're purchasing and like what these plants actually are. One thing that the Monstera Thai constellation has going for it is that in addition to stable variegation, aka you don't have to worry about the plant reverting, the plant is also a large form monstera rather than a small form, which is what the albo monstera is. Large form monstera tend to grow much faster. The nodes stay much closer together, and any sort of variegated large form monstera is usually considered much more rare than small form and is more desired, more coveted, and more expensive. A nice Thai constellation plant will run you anywhere from a few $100s up over $1,000 for something that's large and mature and has multiple leaves. But while we're talking about Thai constellation, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the whole phenomenon of the Thai constellation creme brulee. So this is essentially a Thai constellation that has like more sectoral variegation, like higher amounts of variegation than your typical Thai constellation that is more stable. As far as I know, this has not been recognized by the International Arid Society as a cultivar. It's just a typical variation within types of plants. However, with fancy plants, there is inevitably going to be a phenomenon where lots and lots and lots of low quality variegates get pumped out because they're trying to capitalize off of the name association with the plants that actually look spectacular. So there's a number of people that argue that the Thai constellation creme brulee is actually just what a Thai constellation should look like. It's just a high quality Thai constellation. But to each their own. Just be aware, if you are looking for a Thai constellation creme brulee, it's not technically recognized as its own thing at this point. Another subset of Thai constellation that I have seen floating around is the Thai constellation yellow star. Now, I have only ever seen one listing for this plant, and it was, I believe, for a node, and the price was well into the quadruple digits. Apparently, this is a Thai constellation with variegation that looks more on the yellow side, and just it has a nice, well-distributed pattern of more yellowish variegation. Additionally, I couldn't find much more information on it than that, so if that is indeed like a recognized thing, it is quite rare, and the price point clearly reflects that. Moving swiftly on, the next category of fancy monstera on our list today is the variegated monstera green on green. Now, a lot of times you will hear this referred to as a sport variegated monstera. All variegation is a sport. It's just whether or not the plant has been propagated and stabilized to the point where the variegation is stable in a pattern that you can expect, to the point where it has earned the designation of being a cultivar. Green on green sport variegated monsteras are really popular for people to go hunting for in big box stores, because a lot of times the big box stores do not realize what they have and they leave them in their general stock, and lucky plant hunters can pluck them out of Home Depot and Lowe's and essentially find a diamond in the rough. Sometimes they do need, additional propagation in order to bring out that variegation, but a lot of people have found a lot of success doing this. Now, while it is fairly common for people to find green on green sport variegated monsteras in big box stores, I would say that it's extremely rare for them to find one that is of the utmost quality. Green on green variegated monstera has like a wide variety of different kinds of plants. You find varying shades of green, difference in the intensity. Some of them will have multiple shades of green. Some of them, the plants will start out green and then eventually the variegation will fade down to yellow and through cream. It all just kind of depends on the specific genes from that individual plant. Green on green variegated monstera, it's important to note this is a general category. It is not talking about one cultivar where it was created from one plant that had a mutation. This happens all the time, and as a result, there's a wide variety of quality of specimens, and also within the subset category, there's special plants that have started to be cultivated into special lines. One of these plants that I recently saw online that was really beautiful and notable was called the Monstera Wicked Witch. It's not yet classified as a cultivar, but it is essentially an extremely high quality green on green monstera where the variegation of the lighter green is really, really bright and striking. These are actually starting to get popular enough that people are starting to sell them, and the prices are coming down a little bit. So if you are looking for something to add to your monstera collection that's a little bit beyond the typical albo monstera Thai constellation, a green on green monstera might be something that you should look out for. I've seen these plants recently going for as low as $800 to $1,000 for a small plant with, decent variegation, and I've seen huge specimens of like large form green on green with beautiful variegation go for $5,000–6,000. It all just depends on the specimen and if the seller finds the right buyer. So green on green variegated monstera, very, very cool, a little bit less conventional, and something to definitely keep an eye out for if you are looking to get into fancy monstera. Next on the list, we have the Monstera aurea, sometimes also referred to as Monstera marmorata. And this is essentially a Monstera Deliciosa with variegation that either is yellow or fades down to yellow. These are absolutely beautiful. These definitely are starting to catch on a little bit more. They used to be quite rare and more of a collector plant, but now I think that everyone's kind of sick of albos. They're moving on to Monstera aurea all at once. So prices are starting to come down a little bit as more and more people propagate them and offer them for sale. I sometimes see low quality mid cuttings of Monstera aurea go as low as $400. Small established plants go closer to $800 to $1,000 depending on the condition the plant is in, and that's generally for the small form plants. The large form Monstera aurea are much more rare, especially high quality specimens with really well balanced variegation. It's really hard to find them, and so when they are offered for sale, the price reflects that. One of the highest quality Monstera aurea that I've ever seen offered for sale is from a plant that has been called the Monstera Ava by the person who found the plant and has been cultivating it. It is a large form aurea monstera, and it has really consistent variegation all around the stem. And according to the person who is growing the plant, all of the cuttings have also produced really high quality variegation. A couple of cuttings from Monstera Ava were offered for sale earlier in the year, and they were both in the mid quadruple digits, like low to mid quadruple digits, and they both sold like that. So it just goes to show that when the really high quality specimens of really desirable plants come up for sale, the buyers are out there, and at low to mid quadruple digits would be, I think, a lot for a Monstera aurea, but like I mentioned earlier, super high quality variegation, large form, it automatically jacks up the price. All right, moving on. Next on the list, I think this is the first one where we're really getting into like fancy, schmancy plants. This is the Monstera mint type group. Now, Monstera mint type or Monstera true mint, it's actually a grouping of several different plants. There are true Monstera mint small form. They're definitely out there and they're beautiful and they do go for a bit of money, but they're not the super sought after ones. There are two types of mint Monstera that are by far the most sought after. The first one is the Monstera mint type large form. And this plant can kind of be a little bit confusing because it has, in addition to mint, it also has white variegation. But as far as I understand, the difference between that and the Monstera Deliciosa large form albo is that the large form albo doesn't have true mint variegation. True mint meaning that the mint color is maintained all the way through all of the layers of tissue on the leaf. It's not creating the color by having some variegation in some of the layers and not in others, which is how the Monstera albo has its variegation made. The large form Monstera mint apparently gets mintier as it gets older. So when you do see like juvenile plants, a lot of times they have a lot of white, and every single time, I swear, in those sales feeds, people are like, that's not a mint, that's an albo, and there's like a whole back and forth, and it's a mess. But the large form Monstera mint, I see them still going for like $4,000 for a rooted top cutting easily. Mid cuttings I don't see as often. I don't think there's a ton of people out there that are hacking their Monstera mint large forms into multiple pieces, and like part of that too is that with large form Monstera Deliciosa, the nodes are so packed together that it's really tricky to get like a one node mid cutting. So you don't see those go as much, but usually with those plants, you're gonna be in like the low to mid quadruple digits. In addition to the large form Monstera Deliciosa mint type, there's also the Monstera mint no ID. So this is thought to be an intermediate form of Monstera Deliciosa that is between the small form and the large form, and it's not formally classified as its own species yet, but it's commonly known amongst the aroid community that this plant likely exists and is different. The Monstera Mint No ID is this mystery no ID medium-sized monstera. And the other thing about this no ID monstera is that the fenestrations are really striking. They're very thin compared to the small form and the large form, and they curve a bit more. And the plant just has a little bit of a distinct look to it. And it does climb like the small form, but it's just a little bit different. This plant in and of itself was already cool before you add variegation, and then mint variegation. It's kind of the perfect storm of just being like a really cool plant. So this plant is highly coveted in the aroid community, especially in the Monstera community. It would be the crown jewel of most people's collection. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's really rare. It's hard to get. It's especially hard to get like really nice specimens. When I see these come up for sale, like a nice rooted top cutting established, they're close to $10,000. I've seen unrooted top cuttings just snip off the top, $6,000 for the Monstera Mint No ID. This is getting into some serious Monstera collector territory now. The Monstera Mint No ID has been a unicorn at the top of my wish list for years and years, as long as I've ever even known about the plant, and I'm sure it will probably stay there for quite some time to come. We're getting seriously fancy here, people. So even though the Monstera Mint No ID is super cool, there's actually a couple more mint type monsteras that we're going to touch on really quick. And the first one is the Monstera Yakuza. So this is apparently a large form variegated mint monstera out of Japan that is specifically known for its gray-like color, which I think is absolutely beautiful. I think the plant is absolutely beautiful. I've never actually seen these for sale, so I have no idea what the price point on them would be, but I would imagine it's a hefty one, considering that plants that come out of Japan tend to be like a bit more prestigious than coming out of other places. And the plant overall is just beautiful, and it also happens to be a large form. My guess is that these would be extremely expensive. This is probably a plant that like really you have to know a guy in order to even have the chance to buy, which is like kind of crazy if you think about it, but really cool that there's still forms of monstera out there that haven't quite cracked the community consciousness yet. So the Monstera Deliciosa Yakuza is a really cool one, and I kind of have my eye out to see if any of them pop up in the community, because I've literally never seen them for sale before. And so the last one I want to talk about in the mint type category is a plant that has come recently to be known as the Monstera Mexican Mint. And this plant was kind of at the center of a bit of a controversy really recently. There was some drama. So this plant used to be known as Monstera samsicana. What people had thought was that this guy named Sam had cultivated the plant and brought it, you know, to the United States from Mexico. And it turned out that that wasn't quite what happened, and like really the plants were being grown in Mexico by a pretty well-known grower. Something happened and it came out that the samsicana and the Mexican mint were the same plant. So now the term samsicana, when referring to this Monstera mint type from Mexico, is no longer really in use. The Mexican mint plants are really cool. They a lot of times are very light in color. They have a lot of speckling. They have a lot of like a really light mint, kind of like a bluish tinge to them. And they're really cool plants. But back when the plant was being referred to as samsicana, it was being treated like this super rare unicorn plant that only like one guy had access to. And it turns out that's not the case. The Mexican mint monstera is still going to run you probably a couple grand if you wanted to get one, but it's not up at the level of like you have to know a guy who knows a guy and like get a letter of recommendation to get one like people were kind of thinking it was a couple of months ago. Honestly, this all just kind of happened. So now we are getting into serious fancy plant territory. And the first plant that I'm going to talk about is the Monstera contorta. Now, this is kind of like a group of plants. It's not really like one cultivar, but Monstera contorta, it's something that I've started to see come up more and more as something that Monstera collectors are getting interested in. And essentially it's when the plant has a mutation where the leaves come in crinkled or contorted in some way, and it's stable and it's proven that it's not from a virus. And these Monstera contorta can come in a number of different forms. They can have no variegation, they can have albo variegation, they can have pretty much any type of variegation. I haven't seen that many of them for sale, and I haven't seen that many of them that are like really like striking and eye-catching. The one thing about like Monstera sports, or like sports in general, variegation in general, is that a lot of times it's expensive, but like you have to ask yourself, like, do I even like that? Is it even attractive? And I feel like for me, Monstera contorta is kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, it doesn't happen a lot, it's probably rare, but like, is it even worth it? Like, is it eye-catching? So I guess I would say that for the Monstera contorta, like if you're really into that, you're probably like a Monstera collector, like OG, total Monstera simp level collector, because they're kind of odd and they're really probably not for everyone. All right, so next on the list, and this is one that I think has gotten some prominent lip service in the community pretty recently, and that is the Monstera White Monster. Now, this is a really cool plant. It's very, very unique. This is a plant that has been popularized by Japanese aroid master Kunzo. He is really famous for introducing a number of plants to the market, but the white monster is probably his most famous one. And it's really interesting. This plant is known for being especially resistant to browning, but also being able to survive on very, very, very little green. The plant in some cases looks like it has almost completely white leaves, but apparently it has like a very, very little tiny bit of chlorophyll, and it looks white, or looks mostly white, but the plant is able to sustain itself. And the story behind this plant is really, really interesting. So apparently Kunzo got the white monster monsteras from an old Japanese aroider who had gotten the plants that eventually became the white monster from someone in China right after World War II. The plant that he originally brought over to Japan from China was called the Tianqianran, and apparently the story goes that he got the plants as a thank you for helping with some carpentry work, which I think is a really cool story. So then flash forward to, I think it was the 1960s. This poor guy, he has a health scare. He's in the hospital for several months. And when he gets out of the hospital and starts to recover, unfortunately, basically everything in his greenhouse is dying, except for, I think, 2 of the Tianqianran monstera that he had left. And they didn't look good. So he went ahead and took some propagations to try and save the plant. And apparently it was these propagations from the Tianqianran monstera in dire stress that produced the plants that eventually became the white monster monstera that Kunzo eventually got from him and then popularized. So I think that's a really, really cool story. In addition to the plant just being really interesting and having a lot of cool features, it's just a really cool piece of history, and it's a really spectacular plant. Now, Monstera White Monster, they can go for a lot of money. I've never actually looked into how much Master Kunzo sells them for, but I have seen them listed for sale in groups and auctions and whatnot for prices in the quintuple digits, over $10,000. I think I saw one listed for like 13 grand one time. I don't remember whether or not these plants sold, but they go for a lot of money. It's wild. So the Monstera White Monster, that's definitely a serious collector's plant, and it's definitely something that you probably need to know a guy if Kunzo doesn't have any available, because I don't think it's something that he's able to mass produce. I think it's something that's like very rarely available. Very, very cool plant. Okay, so now we are coming to the end of this video, and the last 2 plants on this list are crazy. So our second to last entry on the fancy Monstera list is called the Monstera Miracle. Now, some of you guys have probably heard of this plant before. It is allegedly a Thai constellation Monstera that also happened to put out aurea variegation. So you've got a Thai constellation, which is a large form Monstera, and it has aurea variegation, and it's a Thai constellation, so it also has white creamy variegation. So you've essentially got just about like every single thing possibly going for this plant at once. Large form, tricolor, aurea. It's crazy. Like, no wonder this plant is basically like a unicorn at this point, because essentially what I read happened, and I don't know 100% for sure, I wasn't able to like verify this, but I did read about it on Reddit, that the Monstera Miracle sold at auction a couple of years ago for almost $100,000. $100,000 for a plant. Essentially what probably happened there was that it was probably purchased by some sort of commercial operation, like a nursery or a tissue culture lab or something, with the hopes of mass producing it and then making a ton of money off of it. We don't know. I don't think it's ever surfaced since that original specimen was sold. And if it was indeed purchased by a super rich private collector, we will probably never see the plant again, because something like that, I think there's only ever been one of them with that level of variegation. Specimens like that just kind of like spontaneously come up, like that's extremely rare. $100,000, that's crazy. But you know, in the next couple of years, if Costa Farms puts that, no, I'm just kidding, that's literally never gonna happen. But yeah, it will be really interesting to see if in the next couple of years any, you know, propagations of that plant end up, you know, showing up anywhere or going up for auction, because that plant was something really special and unique. And I mean, $100,000 for something like that a couple of years ago, like I could only imagine what something like that could go for now. So Monstera Miracle definitely up there with some of the fanciest Monstera out there, but I haven't put it as the grand finale. And this is why. There is a plant that I believe, as of recording this video, still has not been released to anyone except for the original propagator of the plant. That is the Monstera Oceana. Now, this plant is really interesting. This is a plant that somebody found and then was able to continue to propagate it, bring out more variegation, make it look more stable. And in addition to having really interesting kind of like sea foam kind of variegation, it also is contorted. And I believe it's a large form. So, and I will say that the variegation on the true Monstera Oceanas is very, very appealing. It kind of has a blue tint to it. It's very interesting to look at. I do genuinely think that the Monstera Oceana is like, it's a winner. Like that's not like a BS, like people trying to shoehorn things that aren't actually like new things into having something named after them. Like the Monstera Oceana, I believe, is like legit. It's very, very beautiful. And the reason that I've saved it for last is that as of right now, as far as I know, nobody has it. It's still just the original guy that has it. I did, however, see a Facebook post recently that he was going to be putting some of them up for auction soon. So I should go and check and see if that auction has happened, because it's going to be really interesting to see how much those plants sell for. So Monstera Oceana, as of right now, only one guy has it. It's pretty much got everything going for it that you could want in like a collector grade fancy Monstera. So I will leave you with that. It's really cool. I always have so much fun researching these videos where I just like show lots and lots of plants. It's so fun to find new things. And for my plant friends who have made it to the end of this very long video, I appreciate you. And remember when I said not to forget about that gorgeous albo earlier in the video? Here she is again. As a token of my appreciation for being here and making it to the end of this video, you are amongst the first to know that I am actually giving away this beautiful, perfectly marbled Monstera albo. She's fully established in aroid mix and is pushing out beautiful new growth. In order to enter the giveaway to win this plant, all you have to do is be subscribed to my channel, leave a comment down below in this video, and then also go and follow my Instagram, and you will be entered to win this plant. The comments thread in this video is the only place that you can enter, so don't enter on Instagram. I will probably make a few other posts, other places, letting people know about the giveaway and to come watch this video, but please enter down below in the comments of this video, subscribe to my channel, and follow my Instagram, and I will be announcing the winner in the next week or so. So good luck, everybody. I hope that you had a great time learning about fancy schmancy plants with me. I definitely love researching it, and I cannot wait to make somebody the proud new owner of this beautiful albo. So that's gonna be it from me for today. Thank you so much for chilling with me. Have a good one, everybody.